Sure, sure. One of the terms I like to use, and it was somebody else that coined, it's the when it comes to communications and marketing, is the PESO model, PESO. And paid is P is that paid. So that's what P stands for, paid. In the sense that and you probably know this, Steve. When you're in a publication like the Law Bulletin or Law 360 or any of those national publications, yeah, you might get interviewed a few times, but maybe you have to also, do some paid. So it's kind of integrated. And then the space that we're kind of focusing on today is the earned. You did something that earned you the right to be quoted in Bloomberg Law or the Wall Street Journal or Forbes or things like that. And then, the S is kind of the social, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about later, is in the sense like, well, this is, and then, again, with lawyers, that's a little tricky as far as ethics and
Yeah.
rules with
Yeah.
different state bars and things like that. But it is certainly part of the mix. And then, the owned, your website, and things like that. And so, for example, when you asked about where this fits into the marketing, they all fit together. I'm sure you've worked with lawyers where, as you said, they're the smartest lawyer on the block, but their blog on their website is from 19, I don't know when blogs started,
92, something
1987
like
or I
that.
don't know when they
Yeah.
started.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Be That Lawyer, the show that helps you to do what, Tom?
To help you be that lawyer
Okay.
loved by everyone in the world.
Loved by everyone in the world. That's a fair point. That is a fair point. I am working a lot more internationally. I've got clients in Canada, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and now Israel. So
I
it's
thought I
not.
thought you told me you were doing something in Africa a couple of
I
weeks
did.
ago.
I had a bunch of, yeah, I did a bunch of things I did do some work in Africa, but ultimately, I think, I think my fee schedule might not be good for Africans. I don't know, just saying. Um, but I was happy to like step in and do a presentation and offer some suggestions and all that. But ultimately, we have to find that medium between the countries and the lawyers that, actually can enjoy and appreciate and also pay the bills. So there you go. Welcome to the show, Tom. You're such a special friend to me. We've known each other for a long time. We've gotten together many, many times to talk kind of shop about business development and marketing and public relations and all that. And I'm just thrilled to have you back on the show, man.
Oh, well, thank you, Steve. I mean, I always been a big fan of yours. I used to love when you articles would come out in the Law Bulletin, and I go, wow, he's giving away the house.
Giving
All the
away the
stuff that
goods.
people need to do, but they're not doing.
I think my father said to me once when I put out my first book, he was like, "What are you doing? You're giving it all away. No one's going to hire you. You're giving it all away." I go, "Dad, didn't you get a book on golf one time?" I'm like, "How'd that work out for you?" Books are great. They accomplish something important, but ultimately you don't become a scratch golfer because you picked up a book on golf. I'm pretty sure. Um,
Yeah.
Listen, man, great to see you. Let's get started with our quote of the show. I love this one. It's here we go. Proverbs 22:1, and it's a good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. And based on what you're telling me, I've got more silver and gold than I'll ever need in esteem, right? And apparently in ego today. I don't know if that's what's going on, but again, so happy to have you. And tell us a little bit about why you put that quote up front and center.
Sure. Well, so often, when people would say, "What's the value of PR?" I say, "Well, we're helping to protect your most valuable asset, your reputation."
Mhm.
And a lot of times when we're working with clients, I often say, if you're dealing with a crisis and this is the only thing you've ever had a problem with, that's good. But if this is systemic, if this is just something that's going on for years, repeat it, you can't fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, people always joke, they joke about you can't, just because you put lipstick on a pig, it's not going to make it look like, Britney Spears or Taylor Swift. But the point is, your reputation is everything, and that's what you want to treasure above all things. One of my mentors, who was actually an attorney and was the best man at my wedding, so we were covered. Always said, when you're looking to get clients, don't look at a dollar sign on the forehead. Figure out how you can help them, and that's just been something I think very valuable. And Proverbs kind of tells us that your reputation is what
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah, and I think if you have a good name in the market for being a terrific lawyer, for being a great consultant, for getting results for people, and and you protect that asset, that IP of your name and your reputation, yeah, I think that's going to carry a lot more. I mean, if it's bad and everybody hates you, but you're wealthy, I mean, you're not going to be having friends and family and people want to be around you. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Hey, everybody. Again, I'm here with my good friend Tom Ciesielka, president of TC Public Relations. And I would love for you just to share a little bit about how you got into A, public relations, and then B, how you came to find the legal market, because I found it a certain way and I want to hear how you found it.
Sure, sure. The way I found it was actually I kind of backed into it. I was I was doing work for another public relations agency, and they happened to have a number of legal clients, and I had never worked with lawyers. And one of them, I won't say the names, but they were big. They would be like one of those, 800-pound gorillas that's known nationally and internationally, right? A couple of them. I was like, well, it's about a press release, it's about reputation management, it's about getting the news, and I kind of cut my teeth on working with this other, PR firm. And then as time went on, friends of mine who were lawyers, asked me about my work, and I said, yeah, I do work with attorneys. We handle these types of cases, whether it's civil rights, personal injury, med mal, business litigation. And I just started getting, kind of fell into it, so to speak, only because I learned from one of the best, one of my mentors who worked with all these big big law firms. And it was a great experience. And it just kind of, eventually just kind of networked my way into doing more, more with lawyers. And then you and I have, presented at a number of legal associations over the years. And that kind of just kept kept the ball rolling.
Yeah. Well, as you know, it's an interesting industry, especially for non-lawyers coming into it and working kind of exclusively and predominantly with lawyers. And I keep telling people I was on Love Thy Lawyer with my friend Lewis, and he asked me about it. I just said, look, this is like the smartest group of people. They're many of them, at least the ones I talked to, are highly motivated to grow and learn and improve. And yeah, there's some perfectionism and there's some risk aversion and things like that. But ultimately, at least the people I'm engaging with, I don't know that there's a finer group of people. So, and I'm not, again, I have the choice to work in any industry I want, medical, accounting, you name it. And I've worked in over 50 industries, but this is the one that I've really, I've kind of been adopted into, and I think I've adopted them, and it's been a pretty amazing fit, as most people know, for me. So there's a confusion in the marketplace about what marketing is, what thought leadership is, what publicity or PR is. Can you kind of give us a little bit of Tom's perspective on those terms and how you see them? Hey, everybody, I know you're enjoying this interview. To hear more just like this, check out all of the podcasts on our website. Link is in the description below.
Sure, sure. One of the terms I like to use, and it was somebody else that coined, it's the when it comes to communications and marketing, is the PESO model, PESO. And paid is P is that paid. So that's what P stands for, paid. In the sense that and you probably know this, Steve. When you're in a publication like the Law Bulletin or Law 360 or any of those national publications, yeah, you might get interviewed a few times, but maybe you have to also, do some paid. So it's kind of integrated. And then the space that we're kind of focusing on today is the earned. You did something that earned you the right to be quoted in Bloomberg Law or the Wall Street Journal or Forbes or things like that. And then, the S is kind of the social, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about later, is in the sense like, well, this is, and again, with lawyers, that's a little tricky as far as ethics and
Yeah,
rules with
yeah,
different state bars and things like that. But it is certainly part of the mix. And then, the owned, your website, and things like that. And so, for example, when you asked about where this fits into the marketing, they all fit together. I'm sure you've worked with lawyers where, as you said, they're the smartest lawyer on the block, but their blog on their website is from 19, I don't know when blogs started,
92, something
87
like
or
that.
I don't know when they
Yeah,
started.
yeah,
I mean, I was there for part of it, I suppose, but the point is that they don't really think about. And then if I send them to a website for an interview, if they get a link back from a TV or radio or print interview online, that's not going to look good,
yeah.
and therefore it all kind of fits together, and that's why they need somebody at the helm, sort of orchestrating. I like what you mentioned earlier about they're the smartest, but when it comes to marketing, that's not what they do, right? I mean, I have to tell you, I know a lot of times, even with some of my best clients, I'm an interruption. they're in the middle of preparing, for pretrial briefings and all this other stuff going on that they need to do. And I'm saying, well, I got this interview at the Wall Street Journal. I'm busy right now. It's like, oh, okay. So it's kind of that balance of, we're important, but obviously their work is just as important. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I've learned as far as, but the ones who get it is awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really awesome. Well, I would say, you say, well, everything's not worth publicizing. What is worth publicizing? And, I think landmark or precedent-setting cases are key.
Hmm.
So for example, a Supreme Court rules on a constitutional issue. That's a big deal because even if you're doing it in a case in Illinois or Michigan or whatever, it doesn't matter where you are in the country, that's going to affect the whole country because it's a constitutional, federal issue. High-profile cases, right? We know that if the Speaker of the House in at the Capitol in D.C., he trips over a cord and breaks his leg, that's going to be big news. You and I walk out in the hallway and the janitor is kind of sloppy with the vacuum, and I fall. That's not important. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. Like how high profile is the case, or perhaps the people involved in it. Human interest stories are key. So for example, you have a situation where it's a child, who, it was malpractice, and this is a doctor that should have known better, and people are caring about that, and other parents are concerned about, this liability of that. So there's always that kind of the human interest, manager option, and then consumer fraud. That affects everybody. When you think about product liability, things, years ago I was working with, it was very sad. It was a parents whose a child, they didn't, there was the standards for cribs weren't what they are today. And this wasn't that long ago. And unfortunately, it was like a pack and play or something like that, a portable crib. And the thing collapsed, choked the kid on the throat. The kid died, was hanging there, and unfortunately, died. Now, the good news was the parents, turned it around. They set up a foundation, and that generated a lot of publicity only because everybody could identify with bad children's products or baby
Hmm.
products, and that was a good thing as far as and then social justice. A lot of lawyers, particularly the larger firms, they're doing a lot of pro bono work. Human rights, civil rights, freedom of speech, et cetera. Wrongful arrest. Police, whatever that is. That's important because it shows it's obviously you're in the social justice space, but also shows the heart of your law firm that you're giving back. And those are just some of the examples that I can think of.
Okay.
See,
But then how does a lawyer sort of balance the confidentiality and the attorney-client privilege with public relations and getting stories like that out? Do they have to kind of, dance around it, or do they go right for it, or how do they check to make sure what they're putting up is going to be safe?
well, this kind of goes right back to Proverbs where we talked about your reputation.
Yeah.
Your first obligation is to your client, right? Not to publicizing your firm. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? So you have to reach out to the heart of the client, particularly if it's a sensitive issue, and say, I think this is important for our cause. Are you okay with me going more public on this? And then that's kind of the first place you want to go. And then I think that, the second thing is to make sure you're dealing with only publicly available information, right? So we all know that when things get on the court docket or the court filings or any of these places that list the court filings, it's public information. Anyone could, but here's the problem. I always joke with lawyers when I first started working with them, say, give me something called a brief to write a press release for. So I have to take your 200 pages and get it down to one page, 400 words for purposes of, pitching it, to the media. So a lot of times you have to help sort through that and decide, okay, what's publicly available? If it's publicly available, that's okay. And then secondly, you got the salient points of your case that's newsworthy. You might have to pull it out on behalf of the reporter who may be reporting on the case because they may not have time, right? Let's say, for example, it's a temporary restraining order. Those things run pretty quick, right? So you have to say, well, the reason we're doing this is because if you look in the filing, there are these 5 points. That sort of helps with that. And then I guess to avoid speculation, to be careful that when you're going to do this in confidentiality is, a lot of times with reporters will say, well, what if this happens, right? Or what if this happens? And that's not a good thing because, now you're sticking your neck out as opposed to staying to the facts. So, keeping to the facts with a little bit of editorializing is okay. But just remember that once you go beyond that, now you're getting into the whole issue of, trial publicity, ABA model, 3.6, and what you can and can't say, particularly in an active trial.
And what about clearing it up, like clearing it by the client? Like the client, do they have a say in what you decide to publicize about a case?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that you got to start right there.
Okay,
Many
just
times,
it wasn't
well, no,
mentioned. I
you
want to make
do.
sure on top of it.
No, we've run into problems where, I always advise the attorneys I work with when you sign your client agreement, there has to be some statement in there that talks about anything that you would go public, whether it's the media, social, whatever that is. There's always like a disclaimer paragraph. Not, I shouldn't say disclaimer, an understanding that everything runs through the lawyer. And of course, you do the same thing the other way. You don't want to mention your client's name and say something that's going to, I don't know, upset them that you said something. So yeah, I think it really starts at the very beginning. Once you have your client engagement letter, whatever that is, you have to have something that has an agreement about public communications so that, one of your X or Twitter posts or tweets, doesn't end up in court and kind of mess up your case.
Yeah. And I guess on the other side of the coin is should legal professionals address the negative media coverage or of a loss in court? Like, is there anything that they need to do to kind of, you know, get ahead of it?
Well, I agree. Well, first of all, here's something, this would be a quote. Maybe you can make a bumper sticker out of it. Don't call the judge who gave you the bad decision a scumbag. Okay, so that's
I'll get on that bumper sticker right away.
yeah. Well, you're a great marketer, Steve. I don't know. I'm looking.
I could pull, you're saying I could pull it off.
I have to copyright that. And then I would say, you obviously want to acknowledge the outcome, but certainly focus on advocacy. Hey, look, we're disappointed in the verdict. I mean, you can't get around that. But you know what? We brought up important issues. And even if we, quote, think the jury got it wrong, we certainly brought up important issues, worth public exposure.
Yeah.
So, obviously stay, I always encourage everybody to stay on the offensive, not to become defensive or, well, we wish we could have done, that type of thing. Now, if it's relevant, you can certainly mention plans for next steps, right? Because certainly if at the trial level and you're going to go to the appellate court and you go to maybe a state Supreme Court or maybe perhaps even the U.S. Supreme Court, this is not, so often the loss at the lower court level is not a big, most of my lawyers say, we knew we were going to lose there. This is an appellate case, and they know that. And then, of course, you're still keeping the client, confidentiality, trust, even with a loss, only because the goal is not to, have sour grapes or make anyone look bad. And again, the same thing with your client. They're going to probably be heartbroken because, oh, great, I thought we'd be done. Now we have to move on, to another step.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, we're moving into a new age where social media seems to be not taking over public relations, but it's certainly leveling the playing field of how information gets out that normally wouldn't have. And what role does that play for lawyers? How should they be balancing social media versus public relations and getting, interviewed versus just putting out things on social and getting that out to the world that way?
I think the thought leadership and branding is a good place to start. And you know this. I'm sure you do training on it. You probably had people do it. Is LinkedIn. I often think LinkedIn is the place where adults play in social,
Yeah. Yeah.
particularly professionals. And I get it. We did crisis communications for a TikTok issue. Believe me, I don't have a TikTok stream I'm looking at every 5 minutes, like a 12-year-old or whatever. But I think that's a good place to go because that's where you're at. That's where you have LinkedIn groups, professional groups. You can certainly maximize. I think it's a good place because a lot of times, even if you get let's say you get a commentary posted, Law 360 runs one of your articles or a commentary or something, gives you an opportunity to repackage it or point to it and kind of leverage it in your social, and it's safe, right? It's a public document. It's been vetted. It's at a third party. It's a good co-branding opportunity. So I think that's really where, social comes in. Now, the one thing that gets a little tricky is, crisis communications, right? Because, and that's interesting you mentioned TikTok. About a couple of years ago, we had a business that they had a former employee, and I was working with their lawyer on this, that kind of trashed the company on TikTok, and they're getting a lot of sympathy. Well, we did the analysis, and like we weren't so concerned, and but the client, not my attorney client, but the client of the attorney, they were freaking out. I mean, they were putting all kinds of disclaimers on their homepage of their website. I said, no, 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 we want to be transparent. So, let's not let, TikTok, ruin everything because of this one instance. And in the end, we prevailed. I think the other thing is, with social on the positive side, it really is media amplification, right? So, and it's, if you did have an article in a Law 360 or even a local publication like the Law Bulletin, if you wrote a 600 word article, you probably got a lot of great quotes in there, salient points, bullet points, whatever that is. Most people, with all due respect to all these outlets, they're not going to read the whole thing. You can put the link in there. Maybe you're going to do a LinkedIn, I know you do this all the time, Steve, with your articles that you publish on LinkedIn and things like that. They're not going to read the whole thing, particularly if it's a written article. And even with the video interviews, right? Obviously most of the media outlets have shorts, right? Whether it's, on YouTube or things like that, where you have to, give it bite-sized information. So if you were to post it on your various social outlets, having that pull-out quote that hopefully gets them in to want to go to the link and then see the article. So, these are all kind of tactical things that you would do that people sometimes, often forget. And then probably the last thing I would say on social is probably monitoring public sentiment on a certain issue. It might be your case. It might be the topic. A lot of times when I encourage clients, if they're in, so for example, we work with a lot of medical folks or attorneys who do malpractice, and we might be looking for what's trending on social in that particular area. Maybe it's environmental issues, maybe it has to do with pollution or whatever, and that we encourage them to keep an eye on it because you might be next because you provide that type of service. Let's say, we think about, gas stations, and people are concerned about what it means when gas stations have all these tanks and things underground. Well, you have refineries and things like that with tanks underground that could leak and things like that. So you often get dragged into this only because you're doing a comparable service or type of business.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying this fabulous interview. If you want to check out more about what Fretzin does every day to help you be that lawyer, confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker, please check out our services page on our website. Just go to the website, check it out. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks. Yeah. And, there's a timing, it's a marathon, not a sprint, but there's a timing of how long it takes for a lawyer or a consultant or anybody to really get momentum as a thought leader and to maybe position themselves properly to start drawing in business outside of the referrals that they normally get. Do you have a feeling about how long that takes or what you've seen maybe with some of your clients?
Well, what I found is if they're not willing, whether they do it in-house or whether they hire a public relations person in-house or an outside firm to manage it, if you're not willing to commit at least 6 months, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Right.
So 6 months of working with someone, for example, like you, to put you out there to evaluate what you're bringing to the table and get it out there to the media to try to find how you can get placed in multiple spots over time to start drawing that momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say, 6 months is a minimum.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're wasting your time. It's like a lot of times people say to me, I would say, I don't care. You could pay me $1 million for a month, for general publicity.
Yeah.
It'd be a waste of money because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It's just, you're just not going to get it done. You're not going to be established. As you know this, and I'm sure this is a lot of what you're doing with what you do when you're helping lawyers is people want to work with, you start with know, like, trust, right?
Yeah.
And when you get to that trust is not a one and done thing with the first, contact. And so that's kind of the 0 to 6. And then maybe 6 to 12 months, you have some general recognition only because you've sort of been, working with the media and, staying in front of them. You've been giving them information either about your cases or more importantly, you're giving them information to help them, not necessarily promote what you're working on. So for
Things
example,
things that are happening that are topical.
absolutely,
Yeah.
so if this is kind of funny the way, years ago I was working with another PR firm and they worked with commodities companies and and I remember I went in there And he gave me a list. I said, I want you to talk to all the Coco reporters. And I thought, well, I've been doing this for a long time. Is that a certain category? Is that like the news? Is that like what beat is that? What he says, Coco, like chocolate. I go, oh, chocolate. Well, it turns out there are actually people who that's all they write about is cocoa futures.
Oh my God. Okay. Go figure. Go figure.
Well, hey, I'm learning. And once I had the clients I had who did, cocoa futures and news, whatever. When I would contact one of those reporters, they loved me because I would say, by the way, this is what's going on in Brazil. This is and then we became best friends because of that. So I
Yeah.
think that's something that, to keep in mind that if you want to build this thing over 6 months to 12 months, it's staying in contact and giving them information that they need, and it may or may not be what you're doing at the time, knowing that it's going to pay dividends later.
Yeah. Well, super interesting stuff. And I feel like we could probably talk for another 30, but we don't have it. We have a 30-minute gap and we've hit it. So let's talk about your game-changing book, Tom. It's the one-page marketing plan. I like the sound of that. I think most lawyers would too, that it's not a 20-page plan. It's a one-page plan.
Right. Well, I'll tell you why. It kind of ties in sometimes, Steve, when you and I have talked about when you've given me good counsel on business development, right? You don't come and say, okay, Tom, here's War and Peace of marketing.
Yeah.
You go, I'll be dead by the time I read it. I'm a small reader. Right? No, and the issue is that the one-page marketing plan is the book. Is that literally it forces you to come up with a one-page marketing plan. Who's your audience? How are you going to get to them? And how are you going to work them through the pipeline? Again, I'm sure this is all the stuff that you talk about. And when I work with lawyers or you work with lawyers, it can't be when you ask me about how long it takes, I can't say, well, maybe in 10 years you'll get in the New York Times. Well, that's not going to work. And the one-page marketing plan really helped me focus on where do I go to get business? How do I get to that know, like, trust faster? And how do I go about that process? So I always found that when I read that book, it just changed because a lot of times I'd want to, do one of these programs where you get like a 50-page document for your marketing. And that one kind of boiled it down for me.
Well, it's easier not to have it just sit on a shelf because it's too overwhelming. Like when people send me emails and the email is like a page of text, I'm like, I can't even handle this right now. And I feel the same way with super long 400-page books that ramble on with research and they ramble on with all these case studies. And it's like, can you just tell me what to do? Can you just tell me, like, what do I need to do? How do I get this done? I'm a big picture person. Don't give me all the details. Just tell me what I got to do today, tomorrow, and the next day. So listen, let's take a moment and thank our sponsors. We've got PIMCon coming up in October. If you want to check that out, I think it's pimcon.org. And then we've got the Law Her podcast. Sonia Palmer continue to crush it for women, and check that out. And Tom, if people want to get in touch with you, they want to learn more about public relations, they want to learn more about how to build their platform as thought leaders, leveraging an expert like you. How do they get in touch with you?
Sure. We can certainly go to our website, TC, like Top Cat, tcpr.net, N-E-T.
There we go. And you're on LinkedIn. You're on all the major channels, and we'll put all that in the show notes. But hey, man, thanks for coming back. And I feel like you and I saw each other quite a bit for a while, and then we kind of lost touch for a year, and then we come back, and it's like the old times. And I want to make sure that after today, we really keep in the loop with each other.
Yeah, well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate you.
All right.
And thank you, everybody, for hanging out with Tom and I and talking a little PR today, a little bit of thought leadership, and giving you really a really well orchestrated, kind of a feeling about what does it take to be successful and how to do thought leadership and publicity. And Tom was great with that. And this is all about helping you. Business development, marketing, time management, operations, you name it, we've got it on the show. Be that lawyer, everybody. Confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. We'll talk soon. Thank you.